Colonel John Keenan, United States Marine Corps retired, editor of the Marine Corps Gazette, and a Leatherneck original book published by the United States Naval Institute in coordination with the Marine Corps Association. We've just published a new book, and it's called Preparing for Victory, Thomas Holcomb and the Making of the Modern Marine Corps. Its author, again, is Dr. David Ulbrich, and I'm going to interview Dr. Ulbrich about the book and about Thomas Holcomb.
Well, this goes back to 1994 when I was just starting as a master's student at Ball State University. I was looking for a thesis topic, and my thesis advisor there, Dr. Phyllis Zimmerman, suggested a Marine Corps topic and reached out to Ben Frank, who was the chief historian at the time, and she came up with this idea: why don't you study Thomas Holcomb in the defense battalions? So that became my master's thesis, and then I expanded it into a dissertation. And really, once I got started working with the Marines, everyone was so gracious at the association, at the foundation, and at the history division in the archives. I really enjoyed what I was doing. Now, as far as Holcomb being, bookended and being sort of overlooked, that was really one of the driving forces behind, the research. He started with the Marines at 17,000 to 18,000 men in 1936, and when he retired in 1943, there were 385,000 men. I wanted to know how he did this, and whether he was successful, and why he was successful. So how he did it, whether he was successful, and why he was successful. And that really drove the whole topic. And of course, as I said, everyone in the Marine Corps community has been incredibly gracious to me throughout the whole process. Well, he seemed to, first of all, he seemed to be at the right place at the right time, and he also had this ability to learn from his superiors. Certainly, John Russell and Commandant Russell and Commandant Lejeune were his mentors and his supporters, but he seemed to be able to learn from situations and then apply what he learned later on in his career. Certainly the other, in terms of testing his leadership, there's no greater test than leading Marines at Belleau Wood, and he did that successfully. And he had this ability to calmly make decisions, to be able to draw together lots and lots of details, and then make a decision, and then delegate the responsibility and the authority to carry out that decision. It really is. It's uncanny how he was able to be at the right place at the right time, and then he also took advantage of opportunities. He went to the Army War College and the Naval War College, which was rare for any Marine officer at the time, and he took those ideas and applied them later on in his career. Well, certainly he learned some of the ideas in terms of emphasizing education from John Lejeune, making sure that the Marine officers were professional. So he picked up some of those sort of ideas earlier on in his career, but then he had to apply them on a much greater scale. I think one of the big reasons why he was successful was that throughout his career he had gained respect and credibility. For example, when he was commandant and he would go and testify, or some of his subordinates, the senior leaders, would go and testify before Congress, he told them to be honest with the congressional committees. If they didn't have an answer, he or his subordinates would tell the congressman, "I don't have the answer, I'll get it back to you tomorrow." And over a period of time, that helped to generate respect and credibility, so that during the pre-war years, when he needed to beg for money, and the Marine Corps was 18,000 officers and men in 1936, and then year dollars, their operating budget was $20 to $22 million. So he's always begging for money. But then when it came time to expand during 1940, 41, and into the war years, he went back to those same congressional committees, and they would just ask him, "What do you need?" So he had developed the credibility and the respect in the years of famine, so when years of plenty were there, he didn't need to explain every detail and every expenditure to them. Well, one of the techniques was to reach out to the parents while the young men were still in high school, and get the parents to sign, allow them to join the Marine Reserve and reserve component, and then once they turned 18 and or graduated, then they were called to active duty. And there were approximately 685,000 Marines that served in World War II, and of those, fully 70,000 came out of high school and went directly into the Marine Corps. Now, because they're already in the Marine Reserves, they are already they circumvented the need to go to the draft boards and such. So that was one major source of manpower that Commandant Holcomb was able to draw on to fill the Corps' ranks. Coming out of the Tentative Manual for Landing Operations written by the Marine Corps Schools in 1934, which then evolved into FTP 167, which was the Navy's amphibious warfare statement, the landing force commander, the Marine Landing Force Commander, was placed as a subordinate to the Naval Task Force Commander in all phases of amphibious operation: the voyage, the ship to shore, establishing the beachhead, and then inland operations. That's the way the manual and the FTP were written. And this, in the first major amphibious operation in World War II for the Marines at Guadalcanal, this really became problematic because Admiral Kelly Terrible Turner was Naval Task Force Commander and was trying to manage and run and direct the inland operations on Guadalcanal. And of course, he was a fine naval officer, but he was not trained in land operations, and Major General Alexander Vandergrift was. And so you had basically the naval commander here and the Marine commander, the landing force commander here, and what Holcomb wanted to do was to reform that so that during the inland operations they would be co-equals. In other words, the naval commander would command the voyage and the ship to shore, but once the Marines were ashore, once they established their beachhead and started moving inland, then the Marine commander, the landing force commander, would have authority to act independently. Admiral Turner, for example, tried to push the raider concept on the Marine station in the Pacific. So he not only tried to not only interfered in the battle functions and the movements of forces, he also tried to influence force structure. Well, Vandergrift did not like the way this was going. He worked with Thomas Holcomb to reform this. In October 1942, Thomas Holcomb went to Guadalcanal to see the troops, to walk the ground, Bloody Ridge and Edson's Ridge and those sorts of places. And then Holcomb had a meeting with the naval officers there, and essentially Holcomb ghost wrote a change in doctrine. And this change in doctrine made the landing force commander and naval task force commander co-equals during that inland operation stage. Holcomb ghost wrote that change in doctrine, and it was sent by telegram back to Pearl Harbor, to Chester Nimitz, to Admiral Nimitz, and then on to Admiral King back in Washington, D.C. And Holcomb followed each step of the way to try to make sure that this becomes, official doctrine. And so this is kind of an amazing story that in about a month, a major doctrinal change occurred, and this change can be seen today in the Marines' MAGTAF's concept, in which the Marine commander would have autonomy in inland operations or ground operations, helped out by the Navy, but then certainly once that ground operation stage starts, the Marine commander would have autonomy.